that's one thing that you two share. You both grew up in ministry-based households. Your dad was a pastor, your dad's a missionary. How was that, and what similarities did you find when you guys ended up talking about that?
Honestly, a lot of freakishly similar stories. To the point, like they'll start when I was in Myanmar for the first time, talking to her parents, and then they would show me pictures of Jane, and then they're like, "Oh, show us a picture of your mum." And I was like, "Okay." So I pulled out my phone, and then her dad saw the photo. It's like, I know that woman. It's like, what do you mean? He says, like, yeah, when we came to Australia, it's like they had the same calling that my parents had, and that was sort of like to the Middle Eastern and Muslim migrants to Australia.
That's crazy.
And so my parents were already established in Sydney at the time, and they had like a drop-in centre that they were running. And so he went in, and that was after my father had passed away, so it was just my mum. And he went in and he met and spoke with her and trying to get, advice on what to look out for and where he might help and fit in. They never really talked again after that for like however long it's been since then. But yeah, so it was like literally from the point when they came to Australia with that intent, they came to Australia for all the same reason. But then like everything, like both being like pastors, running a church, us having, you sort of live, and you were speaking about it before we were doing the podcast, about all the stuff you have to do as a kid with a family that, is doing it, running a church or supporting a church or working within a church.
She's a cute distraction, bro, so it doesn't matter.
This is true. So like we had all of this, like a lot of very similar stories, like doing deputation, being out on the road, sort of the hardships of being in that, like, it's like kind of like spotlight, but it's different when your parents are the ones running a ministry. You, as a child, they expect you to, and it's a lot of pressure for a child, to expect you to live and walk that same life. When as a child, you just want to be a kid, like,
you want to eat Cocoa Pops and watch Looney Tunes.
Exactly.
Can I ask, like, Phil, when I found out your dad was a pastor, I tripped out. Like, I was like, what? Like, I didn't know the story, and then you explained it to me and all that. But was there ever and I say that in the most respectful way, in that you were so, I don't even know the word. You didn't seem like a pastor's kid, you know what I'm saying? But in a good way, in that you still loved God, you still loved being part of the boys, having a good time, all that. Was there ever a pressure for either of you to force yourself into the ministry, even though the Lord didn't have that for you?
So for me, probably not as much, because by the time I was coming of age, obviously my father passed away when I was just as I turned 13. So, and then my mum had to, like, she slowly transitioned out of running that drop-in centre, because it's like possible,
hard,
possible for her to run it as a single mother. And then she went into just being a nurse after that and raising me, right? So I didn't really, even though I grew up as a pastor's kid and, like missionary's kid, but I was like in a worldly school. I didn't really have that pressure that, like, oh, you need to go do whatever, right? Obviously, like, still now, even to today, have that calling where it's like, nah, I don't, like, for me, honestly, I'm not the guy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never going to be the guy, like a pastor or a missionary that's at the front. But, like, I still have that calling, like, nah, there's still support that's needed. And I mean that more than just financially. So, like, there's the guy that helps, the guy that works, the guy that, helps the missionary achieve what they're trying to do for God. So definitely still have that calling.
Yeah, for sure. Jane?
So my parents weren't necessarily, you need to be in the ministry. But I think growing up and seeing that you're more sensitive to the needs of the missionaries, and you see that, I think, like, and people in ministry, and you tend to empathize with them a lot more. As a kid, I remember, like, I surrendered to the mission field, like, when I was 8. I remember my dad preaching from Isaiah, saying, whom shall I send? who shall go for us. But like, I think, and that was something that I really struggled with, like as I grew older, and like obviously I'm not on the mission field. Like, I know that missions is a close.
It's got a big part in your
part
heart.
in my heart. But like, what is it? And like, I've spoken to Phil about it a lot, like at length, and we realize there's a lot of missionaries that go out, but they don't necessarily stay on the field. And we know how hard it is to be on the mission field, and it might be an encouraging, letter or just being a friend to them a lot of the times, because when you're a missionary, I feel like some people just expect them to be some kind of like supernatural humans.
Yeah.
That don't feel.
100%.
And like they just, you're supposed to be a missionary.
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
Siri doesn't have an answer for that. Sorry.
They just expect them to run and run and run without,
It's easy to forget people in ministry are people.
Yeah, human they're bad.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and they get really lonely. And like last time I spoke to you, I said like how they become foreigners in wherever they go.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need a friend.